The wind howled through the small town, carrying with it a cold so sharp it felt like tiny needles on the skin. Snow blanketed every street, every roof, and every tree, turning the town into a quiet, white world. In the middle of this storm, a small house with a red roof sat snugly on the edge of town. Inside, Mabel, a strong and kind grandmother, moved about her kitchen. She hummed softly, stirring a pot of soup over the fire. Her home was warm and filled with the comforting smells of herbs and baking bread. Outside, the blizzard raged, but inside it was safe and peaceful. Mabel had lived in this town her entire life. Everyone knew her as a woman with a big heart and an even bigger sense of courage. She had lived through many winters, each one harder than the last, yet she never let the cold or fear stop her. She believed that helping others was the most important thing in life. Tonight, however, she had no idea that she would be called upon to help in a way she had never imagined. Far from Mabel's house, on the snowy road that led into town, a group of 9 bikers struggled against the storm. Their motorcycles were covered in snow, their engines barely running. The wind whipped at their leather jackets and their faces were red from the cold. They were part of the Hells Angels, known throughout the region for their fearsome reputation. But tonight, in the middle of a blizzard, even they were powerless. Every attempt to move their bikes only sank them deeper into the snow. The storm was relentless and visibility was almost zero. One of the bikers, Leo, slammed his gloves against his thighs in frustration. "We are stuck," he shouted over the wind. "There's no way out until this storm ends." Another biker, Sam, knelt beside his bike, trying to clear the thick layer of snow from the wheels. "We can't stay here," he said nervously. "It's too dangerous. The cold will get us if we wait too long." His teeth chattered even through his scarf and helmet. The bikers were used to facing danger, but nature's force was something they could not control. The storm had trapped them, and every second made their situation more serious. Meanwhile, Mabel, looking out her frost-covered window, noticed faint lights flickering down the road. Her sharp eyes recognized movement against the snow, and instinct told her something was wrong. She wrapped herself in a thick coat, pulled on her boots, and went outside. The wind was harsh and snow stuck to her hair and eyelashes, but she walked steadily toward the struggling group. When she got closer, she could see the fear and frustration on their faces. Most people would have kept their distance, afraid of confrontation, but Mabel felt only concern. "Hello there," she called, her voice carrying over the wind. The bikers looked up, startled. They were not expecting anyone in the middle of the storm, let alone an elderly woman walking confidently through the snow. "You look like you need some help," she said warmly. Leo squinted at her, unsure what to say. We can manage," he stammered. But even as he spoke, it was clear they could not. The snow was too deep and their bikes were immovable. Mabel smiled and gestured toward her home. "Come with me. You can wait out the storm in my house. You will be safe and warm." It took a few moments for the bikers to decide. They were used to handling problems on their own, never relying on strangers. But there was no choice. One by one, they followed Mabel, trudging through the thick snow. She led them carefully, making sure no one slipped or fell. When they finally reached her door, she opened it and invited them inside. The warmth of the house hit them immediately. The fire crackled in the hearth and the smell of soup made their mouths water. Mabel guided them to chairs and handed out cups of tea, smiling at their relief. "Sit down," she said. "You must be freezing. I'll make you something to eat while you warm up." The bikers looked around the small house. It was cozy, with pictures of family on the walls, a bookshelf filled with old novels, and blankets stacked neatly in the corner. This was not the home of someone weak or fragile. It was the home of someone who had learned to face life with strength and grace. Leo, still shivering, finally spoke.
"Why are you helping us?"
"Most people would have ignored us, or worse." Mabel's eyes twinkled. "Because no one should face a storm alone. Everyone deserves help when they need it." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. The bikers, used to rough words and tougher people, felt a strange warmth in her kindness. For the first time that night, they began to relax. They realized that Mabel was not just brave. She was generous and wise. In the middle of a blizzard, a small grandmother had offered her home, her food and her care to 9 strangers. They followed her into the warmth, not knowing that this night would change their lives forever. The storm outside continued to rage, shaking the windows and piling snow high against the walls of Mabel's house. Inside, the warmth of the fire and the smell of hot soup made the small room feel like a safe haven. The 9 bikers, still shivering from the cold, settled into chairs around the kitchen table. Mabel moved with quiet efficiency, ladling steaming soup into bowls and placing them carefully in front of each of them. "Eat up," she said, smiling. "You need your strength to face the cold." Her voice was calm and kind, and for a moment the bikers felt like they were somewhere far from the storm, somewhere safe. They looked at each other, surprised at the gentle authority of this grandmother. None of them had expected such care, and it made them feel something they rarely felt: trust. Leo, who had been quiet since arriving, finally spoke. "We are not used to being treated like this. Most people look at us and see trouble." He poked at his soup with his spoon, unsure how to start a conversation. "But you don't. Why?" Mabel set down the pot she had been stirring and wiped her hands on her apron. She looked at him, her eyes steady. "Because everyone deserves kindness. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. Out there," she nodded toward the snowy windows, "life can be harsh, but here, you are safe. That's all that matters right now." Her words were simple, yet they struck a chord. The bikers had grown up in a world where they were often judged or feared. They were used to being tough, to hiding their softer sides, and to expecting the worst from strangers. But Mabel treated them as human beings, not as a group of dangerous outsiders. The realization made them feel grateful and a little ashamed. While they ate, Mabel moved around the kitchen, topping up their cups with hot tea and offering more bread. She even checked their hands and faces for frostbite, gently rubbing warm tea into their frozen fingers. The bikers exchanged quiet glances, impressed by her attention to detail. Sam, who had been one of the first to doubt her, found himself smiling for the first time in hours. "You have a strong heart, Grandma," he said softly, finally breaking the silence. "You don't just care, you act. You don't wait for someone else to do it," Mabel chuckled. "I've had a lot of winters," she said. "I've learned that storms don't wait for anyone. You have to be ready to help when you can." Her words carried more than experience. They carried a sense of quiet courage that the bikers could see in her eyes. Outside, the wind continued to howl, rattling the windows and pushing snow against the walls. But inside, the room felt like a sanctuary. The bikers started to share small pieces of their own lives, talking quietly over the table. They told stories of their travels, their adventures, and even their mistakes, feeling safe enough to be honest with someone who did not judge them. Mabel listened, nodding and smiling, sometimes laughing softly at a funny story. Her presence made the room feel calm, and for the first time that night, the bikers felt more than just relief. They felt respect. Hours passed, and the storm showed no sign of slowing. Mabel suggested that the bikers take turns resting, while others kept the fire going. She led them to a small living room filled with blankets and soft chairs, making sure each person had a warm place to lie down. Even though she was small in stature, her energy and determination made it clear that she was someone to be admired. Leo, who had been the most skeptical, watched her quietly as she moved around the room. He realized that this grandmother had not only opened her home to them, but had done so without hesitation, without fear. She had put herself in the middle of a storm to help strangers, and he could not help but feel a deep sense of respect. "She's incredible," he whispered to Sam, who nodded in agreement. By nightfall, the bikers had grown comfortable. They had eaten, rested, and shared stories, and the warmth of Mabel's home had begun to seep into their hearts. The storm outside remained fierce, but inside there was laughter, conversation, and a feeling of safety. It was a strange yet comforting situation for the bikers. They had expected to endure the storm, but instead they had found kindness, courage, and a sense of belonging. Mabel finally sat down in her own chair, exhausted but satisfied. She looked around at the group she had welcomed into her home, feeling a quiet pride. These bikers were strangers, yet she had treated them as family. And in the way that only acts of true kindness can do, she had begun to change something in them as well. As the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, the bikers realized that tonight would not be forgotten. They had seen courage in its quietest form, and they had learned that kindness could come from the most unexpected places. Mabel, the brave grandmother, had given them warmth, food, and safety, and in return she had earned their respect. The storm outside was still dangerous, but the first light of morning filtered through the frost-covered windows, casting a soft glow across Mabel's cozy kitchen. The storm outside had not yet ended, but inside the house was alive with warmth and quiet energy. The 9 bikers had spent the night huddled by the fire, resting and recovering from the cold, and now they were beginning to feel more like themselves. Mabel moved about the kitchen, humming a soft tune, preparing a hearty breakfast. She cracked eggs into a bowl, whisked them carefully, and placed a pan on the stove. The smell of cooking food filled the room, wrapping the bikers in a comforting embrace. She laid slices of bread on a tray, ready to be toasted, and reached for her favorite jar of honey. "You'll need your strength today," she said kindly, placing a bowl of steaming eggs in front of each biker. "It's still very cold outside, and you need warmth from the inside too." The bikers, still surprised by her care, sat quietly, eating the breakfast she had made. Leo looked up from his plate and said, "Grandma, you really didn't have to do this for us. Most people wouldn't even open the door in this weather." Mabel smiled, her eyes bright with kindness. "Maybe not, but I believe everyone deserves help when they need it. Tonight it was you. Tomorrow it could be anyone." Her words were simple, yet they carried a deep truth that resonated with the bikers. Sam, who had been quiet most of the night, finally spoke. "You're different from anyone we've met. Most people see us and expect trouble. You see people, not reputations." Mabel chuckled softly. "I see people, Sam. People are always more than the labels others give them. You have good hearts, even if life has made you tough." The bikers looked at her, some nodding, others quietly thoughtful. Her words were gentle, but they felt powerful. They had faced danger, hardship, and judgment in many forms, but they had never felt respected in the way Mabel respected them. For the first time, they began to see themselves through someone else's eyes, a kind and unjudging perspective. As they ate, the storm outside continued to rage. Snow drifted against the windows, and the wind made the trees bend under its force. But inside, the bikers felt safe and calm. Mabel moved from one table to another, making sure everyone had enough food and hot tea. She even handed out thick blankets to wrap around their shoulders while they ate. After breakfast, Mabel suggested that they help with small chores around the house to keep warm and busy. She handed Leo a broom and asked him to sweep the kitchen floor. She gave Sam a stack of firewood to carry into the living room. Even though the tasks were simple, the bikers found themselves laughing and joking, enjoying the unusual experience of helping someone rather than fighting or traveling through the storm. Mark, another biker, looked at Mabel as she worked. "You really do everything yourself?" he asked, amazed. "You never seem tired or worried, even in this storm." Mabel shook her head. "I've had to take care of myself for many years, but taking care of others is just as important. It keeps the heart warm, even in the coldest weather." The bikers realized she was right. They had always been strong and independent, but there was something in Mabel's courage that made them reflect on their own lives. She was not a woman of great size or strength, yet she had faced the storm with confidence and without fear. Her bravery was quiet, steady, and inspiring. By mid-morning, the storm began to ease slightly. Snow still fell, but the worst of it had passed. The bikers went to the windows to look outside, seeing the snow-covered roads and thinking about their journey back home. Mabel stood nearby, watching them, and noticed the mixture of gratitude and hesitation on their faces. "You don't have to rush," she said gently. "The roads are still dangerous. Stay here until it's safe. You're welcome as long as you need." Her words made the bikers pause. They had expected to leave as soon as possible, but now they realized that Mabel's home had become more than just a shelter. It was a place of comfort, understanding, and trust. Leo stepped forward, his voice soft but firm. "Grandma, you've done so much for us. We can't just leave without promising something. We want to make sure you know we appreciate everything. What you did for us, no one else would have." Mabel smiled quietly. "You don't owe me anything. Just stay safe and remember the kindness you receive. That is enough." The bikers exchanged glances, understanding that her words were true, yet they also felt a deep desire to honor her. They had been touched by her courage and her generosity, and they wanted to show that they valued her as much as she valued them. For the rest of the morning, the bikers helped Mabel with more chores. They stacked firewood, cleared snow from the doorstep, and even helped tidy the living room. Mabel guided them patiently, offering encouragement and sharing stories from her past. Each story was full of life lessons, laughter, and sometimes gentle warnings, reminding the bikers that strength and kindness often went hand in hand. As the day progressed, the bond between Mabel and the bikers grew stronger. They had come as strangers seeking warmth, but they were beginning to feel like part of a family. They had seen courage, generosity, and wisdom in a grandmother who could have easily stayed safe inside her home. Instead, she had faced the storm, offered help without hesitation, and treated them with respect. By noon, everyone sat together once again, sipping tea and watching the snow fall softly outside. They were no longer just bikers stranded in a storm. They were friends united by an experience that would remain in their hearts forever. Mabel looked around the table, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She had helped those in need, and in return, she had gained their respect, loyalty, and friendship. The wind outside had calmed slightly, but snow still fell thickly, covering the roads in a blanket of white. Mabel's house remained warm, filled with the smell of fresh bread and the quiet crackle of the fire. The 9 bikers were awake and moving about, feeling stronger after the breakfast Mabel had prepared. They were beginning to understand that their night in the storm had become more than just an unexpected delay. It was becoming a lesson in trust, courage, and kindness. Mabel moved from the kitchen to the living room, carrying a tray with cups of tea and a few warm pastries. She placed them on the low table in the center, and the bikers gathered around. "You need to keep your energy up," she said kindly. "The roads outside are still dangerous. Don't rush. Sit, rest, and eat." Leo, looking around the room, shook his head with a small smile. "Most people wouldn't do this for us. Most people would see the storm and just close their doors. But you—" He paused, unable to finish the thought. Instead, he sipped his tea, feeling the warmth spread through his body. Mabel smiled. "I have lived many winters, Leo. I've learned that storms don't choose who they touch. Everyone deserves help, especially when the cold and wind are against them. It's the right thing to do." Sam, who had been leaning back in his chair, finally spoke. "It's strange. We are strangers to you, yet you treat us like family. It's not something we are used to." Mabel nodded. "Kindness is free, Sam. You don't have to know someone well to help them. You just have to care." The bikers exchanged glances, feeling a mix of respect and admiration. They had always been judged by their reputation, often feared or ignored. Yet this small woman, this grandmother, had treated them as equals, as people. That simple act of trust and care was more powerful than anything they had encountered in their years of travel and hardship. After tea, Mabel suggested they all move to the living room and sit by the fire. "It is still cold outside," she said. "We can wait here until the storm lets up. The fire will keep us warm and we can talk, share stories, or just rest." The bikers moved to the living room, stretching out on chairs and couches, some wrapping themselves in blankets. Even though they were rough and tough men, they felt a sense of peace they rarely experienced. Mark, one of the bikers, watched Mabel as she moved around the room, arranging more blankets and making sure everyone was comfortable. "You never stop, do you?" he asked quietly. "You are always doing something for someone else." Mabel laughed softly. "I do what I can. Life is too short to sit and wait for others to act. If you can help, you help. That's all there is to it." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that the bikers felt deep in their hearts. The conversation turned to the storm outside. The bikers discussed the roads, how deep the snow had become, and how long it might take for the plows to clear the streets. Mabel listened patiently, occasionally giving advice or telling a story from her own experience in past winters. She spoke of times when the snow had been heavy, of neighbors helping neighbors, and of the strength that comes from facing challenges together. The bikers began to see that her courage and wisdom were not just in words, but in the way she lived her life every day. By mid-morning, some of the bikers began helping Mabel around the house. They stacked firewood by the hearth, cleared small paths of snow near the door, and even helped with the dishes after breakfast. It was unusual for them to work quietly and respectfully alongside someone, but Mabel's calm presence made it natural. They found themselves enjoying the simple work, feeling a connection to her and to each other. Leo paused for a moment, looking out the window at the snow-covered street. "We can't just leave you like this when it's safe to go," he said. "You helped us when no one else would. We owe you more than thanks." Mabel shook her head gently. "You don't owe me anything." By midday, the storm had slowed, but snow still covered the roads in a thick, sparkling layer. Outside, the town was quiet, with only the soft whisper of the wind moving through the trees. Inside Mabel's house, the atmosphere was warm and lively. The 9 bikers were awake, sitting by the fire, sipping tea and talking quietly among themselves. Even though the storm was easing, they knew the roads were not yet safe, and they were grateful for Mabel's patience and generosity. Mabel moved around the kitchen, preparing a light lunch. She set bowls of soup on the table and placed bread and small jars of jam beside them. The bikers watched her work, noticing how effortlessly she moved, attending to everyone without fuss. She was small but carried herself with a quiet strength that commanded respect. "You have done so much for us already," Leo said, breaking the silence. "We can help somehow. Let us do something for you." Mabel smiled gently, shaking her head. "You have already helped yourselves by taking care of each other, and by being polite and respectful. That is enough for me." Sam, who had been watching her quietly, leaned forward. "We want to make sure you know how much we appreciate you. Most people wouldn't do what you did. We have been through a lot of storms, but we have never seen someone act like this." Mabel poured herself a cup of tea and nodded. "I have lived long enough to know that kindness is always stronger than fear. You never know how much one small act can change someone's life." The bikers sat quietly, thinking about her words. They had faced many dangers, both on the road and in life, but the courage and wisdom of this grandmother had left a deep impression on them. They realized that strength did not always come from size or power. It could come from the heart, from caring for others even when it was difficult. After lunch, Mabel suggested that they spend some time learning something useful while they waited for the storm to clear completely. She taught them how to make hot cider using spices from her pantry, and shared a few of her old recipes. The bikers laughed and joked as they tried to follow her instructions, spilling a little sugar here and there or adding too much cinnamon. Mabel laughed along with them, enjoying the unexpected fun. "This is different from what we are used to," Mark said with a grin, stirring his cider carefully. "But it feels good. You make everything feel simple and comfortable." Mabel smiled at him. "Life can be simple if you choose to see it that way. Even in a storm, even when things are difficult, there is always something good to hold on to." As they worked together, stacking wood for the fire, cleaning up spilled sugar and wiping counters, the bikers realized how much they enjoyed helping and learning from Mabel. She treated them as equals, not as strangers or outsiders. The trust and respect they felt for her grew stronger with each passing hour. By mid-afternoon, the storm had almost completely stopped. The sky outside was pale gray and the sun began to peek through the clouds. The roads were still covered in snow, but it was clear that travel would be possible soon. The bikers gathered their gear, checking their motorcycles and preparing for the journey ahead. Leo stepped forward, looking directly at Mabel. "We want you to understand something," he said firmly. "What you did for us tonight and all day yesterday, it means more than you can imagine. You saved us in more ways than one. We are going to make sure you are safe from now on. If you ever need anything, you can count on us." Mabel's eyes softened. "That is very kind of you. But remember, kindness is its own reward. Helping others is always its own reward," Sam added. "We are not just saying this. We mean it. You helped us when we were stranded and cold. You gave us warmth, food, and safety. We will never forget it. And we will never forget you." Mabel nodded quietly, touched by their words. The bikers spent the next hour clearing the snow from Mabel's driveway and the path to the road. They worked together, laughing and joking as they moved the heavy snow, careful not to damage the small garden that Mabel had tended so lovingly. Even though they had traveled through many winters and storms, they found themselves inspired by her courage and determination. When the last of the snow was cleared, the bikers lined up near the door, ready to leave. Mabel stood beside them, smiling warmly, holding a small tray of snacks for their journey. "Take care of yourselves," she said. "The roads are still tricky. Go slow and remember the kindness you received today." Leo looked at her seriously. "We will never forget, Grandma. You helped us when no one else would. You are part of our lives now. We promise to always look out for you no matter what." Mabel felt a warm glow in her heart, knowing that her actions had created a bond that would last far longer than the storm. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles, they waved to Mabel, feeling a sense of gratitude and loyalty that they had never experienced before. She watched them ride down the snow-covered road, their figures growing smaller in the distance, and smiled. She had faced the storm with courage, and in doing so she had earned not only their respect but their lifelong loyalty. Inside the small house, the fire still crackled, and the warmth lingered in the air. Mabel sat down with a cup of tea, reflecting on the events of the past day. She had offered help freely, and in return she had found trust, friendship, and loyalty. The storm had tested her, but it had also revealed the strength of her heart, a strength that would continue to guide her and inspire others for years to come. The snow outside had finally begun to settle. The streets were quiet, the storm having left the town wrapped in a soft white blanket. Inside Mabel's small house, warmth and comfort lingered in every corner. The 9 bikers, now more relaxed and alert, were finishing the last of the tea and snacks Mabel had provided. They had spent hours learning from her, helping around the house, and sharing stories, and in the process, they had begun to see her as someone extraordinary. Mabel moved between the bikers, checking to see that everyone was comfortable and had enough to eat. She paused to adjust a blanket around Leo's shoulders, who had dozed off slightly by the fire. "There," she said softly. "Better?" Leo nodded, smiling, and felt a strange sense of gratitude he had never felt before. It was more than the warmth of the blanket. It was the warmth of her care, something that had touched him deeply. Sam stood by the window looking outside at the snow-covered road. "It's hard to believe we were stuck out there just yesterday," he said quietly. "If it weren't for you, we might still be out in the storm." Mabel joined him at the window. "Yes, the storm was strong, but it is always possible to face challenges when you have courage and a clear heart," she said gently. "Sometimes helping others is the best way to face a storm." The bikers looked at her, realizing that her strength was not in her physical abilities, but in her heart and mind. She had stayed calm, confident, and kind even when the storm outside was threatening and dangerous. It was a type of courage that they had rarely seen, a quiet bravery that inspired trust and respect. Mark, who had been listening, leaned back in his chair. "We have been through so much in our lives," he said slowly, "but I have never met anyone like you, Grandma. You didn't just help us. You showed us something we didn't know we needed. You showed us what it means to care without expecting anything in return." Mabel smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Caring is never wasted. Every small act of kindness matters. Even in the coldest, darkest storms, there is always a way to bring warmth to someone else's life. That is what matters most." The bikers were quiet for a moment, thinking about her words. They had spent years relying on themselves, on their strength, and on each other. But this woman had reminded them that there was another kind of strength, one that came from generosity, patience, and courage. After a short pause, Mabel suggested that they prepare for the journey back to town once the roads were cleared. "It will still be slippery," she warned. "Take your time and make sure you travel safely. You are strong, but the snow is unpredictable." The bikers nodded, grateful for her advice and for the careful thought she had given to their safety. Before leaving, they wanted to do something in return. Leo stepped forward, speaking on behalf of the group. "Grandma, we promised each other that we would make sure you are safe. We want to do more than just say thank you. We want you to know that you can count on us no matter what happens." Mabel shook her head gently. "You have already given me the greatest gift," she said. "You listened, you respected, and you cared. That is more than I could ever ask for." Sam, however, was not satisfied with words alone. "We mean it, Grandma. From now on, you will never face danger alone. If you ever need help, we will be there. You helped us when we were stranded and cold. Now it is our turn." Mabel's heart warmed at their promise. She had given them kindness, and they had returned loyalty. It was a bond formed in trust, strengthened by courage and care. The bikers spent the next hour helping Mabel secure her home for the rest of the winter. They stacked firewood neatly by the door, cleared the last of the snow from the pathways, and checked that the roof and gutters were free from ice. Even small tasks done together felt meaningful. They realized that helping someone, not for recognition but for genuine care, could bring a satisfaction unlike anything else they had experienced. As the afternoon sun peeked through the clouds, casting a gentle glow on the snow outside, Mabel and the bikers stood by the door, looking out at the quiet town. Days passed since the storm, but the bond between Mabel and the 9 bikers continued to grow. Though they had returned to their usual routines, the memory of the snowy night remained vivid. Every time one of them passed through the town, they would stop by Mabel's house, not just out of respect, but because they genuinely cared for her well-being. Mabel, meanwhile, carried on with her life, tending her garden, preparing meals, and visiting neighbors. She never boasted about the events of the blizzard, But the townspeople had heard whispers of her courage. They spoke of a small, kind-hearted grandmother who had helped a group of bikers in the middle of a fierce storm. Many were amazed, but Mabel simply smiled quietly, focusing on her daily routines. For her, helping others was natural, not a heroic act. One morning, Leo arrived at her door, a small bag in his hand. "Morning, Grandma Mabel," he said cheerfully. "I thought you might like some fresh supplies." The storm left the town a bit short on food and essentials. Mabel welcomed him inside, grateful for his thoughtfulness. She unpacked the items and smiled. "Thank you, Leo. That is very kind of you." As the day went on, the other bikers arrived, each bringing small gifts or offering to help with chores around the house. Some carried firewood. Others helped repair a fence that had been weakened by the storm. Mabel watched them work with a quiet satisfaction, realizing that the loyalty they had promised was genuine. These men who had once been strangers were now her protectors, her friends, and her extended family. Mark, standing by the hearth, glanced around the room. "You've done so much for everyone here, Grandma Mabel. It's clear that people respect you for more than just what you say." "It's who you are." Mabel chuckled softly. "I only do what I can. Strength isn't always shown in power. Sometimes it is shown in kindness and in being there when others need help." Sam, who had been stacking firewood, looked up. "We have learned that from you. You faced the storm, cared for us without hesitation, and kept us safe. That is the kind of courage we want to live by. You've inspired us more than you know." Throughout the day, the bikers worked together to make Mabel's home more secure for the coming winter. They fixed the roof, cleared walkways, and even helped organize her pantry. All the while, Mabel shared stories from her life, lessons she had learned about patience, bravery, and the importance of community. The bikers listened intently, realizing that there was much more to life than speed and adventure. There was the quiet, steady courage of someone who had faced challenges without fear. By evening, the small house felt alive with warmth and laughter. The bikers had cooked a meal for Mabel as a gesture of gratitude, something she had never expected. They had prepared a simple but hearty dinner, and the kitchen was filled with the smell of roasted vegetables and fresh bread. Mabel served tea while they shared stories of their travels, jokes, and moments of reflection. Leo raised his cup to Mabel. "To Grandma Mabel," he said, "for showing us what true courage and kindness look like. You saved us when we were in trouble, and now we want to make sure you always know you are safe and cared for." The other bikers nodded and smiled, echoing his words. Mabel's heart swelled with warmth. She had never expected such loyalty and respect, yet here it was, offered freely and genuinely. After dinner, they all sat by the fire, talking quietly. The sun had set, and the night was calm, a stark contrast to the storm that had brought them together. Mabel looked around at the 9 men who had promised to protect her, and she felt a deep sense of peace. Her actions during the blizzard had created a bond that would last a lifetime. Leo, sensing the moment, spoke again. "Grandma Mabel, you showed us that courage is not just about fighting storms outside. It's about standing strong in life and helping others. We have promised each other that we will protect you, and now we are keeping that promise. You are part of our family, and we will always look out for you." Mabel smiled softly, touched by their words. "I never asked for protection. I only asked that we care for one another. But I am grateful for your friendship and loyalty. It means more than I can express." As the night deepened, the bikers helped Mabel prepare for bed, making sure her firewood was stocked and her home safe. They cleaned up together, their teamwork reflecting the respect and trust that had grown between them. When it was finally time to leave, they lingered at the door, not wanting to say goodbye, knowing that their bond was something permanent. Mabel watched them ride off into the snowy streets, feeling a sense of gratitude and contentment. She had faced a storm, helped strangers, and in return had gained loyalty, protection, and lasting friendship. The bond formed during the blizzard had grown into something stronger, a connection that would endure through seasons and years. The night settled over the town, quiet and peaceful. Mabel returned to her cozy chair by the fire, reflecting on the events of the past days. She had proven that courage and kindness could create loyalty, respect, and trust. The 9 bikers had kept their promise, honoring her in ways she had never imagined, and she knew that the bond they shared would remain unbroken. The days turned into weeks, and Mabel's home remained warm and lively. The blizzard had long passed, but the bond formed during that storm had not faded. The 9 bikers continued to visit her, not out of obligation but because they genuinely cared. Each visit strengthened the connection, turning strangers into a family united by respect, loyalty, and gratitude. One crisp morning, Mabel was tending her small garden when she heard the familiar roar of motorcycles approaching. She looked up and saw the 9 bikers arriving together, their faces bright with smiles. They parked near the house and came forward, carrying small gifts and baskets of supplies. Their loyalty had not wavered since the storm, and they had made it a habit to check on her regularly, ensuring she was safe and well. Leo stepped forward first. "Good morning, Grandma Mabel," he said cheerfully. "We brought a few things to help you with the garden and your home. We thought it might make your work easier." Mabel smiled warmly at him. "Thank you, Leo. That is very thoughtful of you." The bikers spread out around the garden, helping her plant new flowers, repair the fence, and clear paths for easy walking. Mabel guided them patiently, showing them how to plant bulbs and water the soil correctly. The men worked together, laughing and joking, enjoying the simple pleasures of helping someone who had done so much for them. Mark, wiping sweat from his forehead, looked at Mabel. "You know, Grandma, we've been through storms and trouble before, but nothing like what we experienced with you. You didn't just help us survive the blizzard. You taught us the value of kindness and courage. That's why we keep coming back. We want to make sure you are always safe and cared for." Mabel chuckled softly. "I never expected anything in return. My joy comes from seeing others cared for and happy, but I am grateful for your friendship. It has been a blessing." The day passed with laughter, hard work, and shared stories. Mabel told the bikers about her childhood, about winters far colder than the recent storm, and about times when neighbors had come together to help each other. The bikers listened intently, realizing that courage and kindness were not just words. They were actions, passed down through generations and now shared with them. As the sun began to set, painting the snowy landscape in shades of gold and pink, the bikers gathered near the fire outside Mabel's house. They had built a small fire pit to keep warm while finishing up the day's work. Leo looked around at the group and then at Mabel. "Grandma Mabel, you saved us in the storm and we promised to protect you for life. That promise is not just words. It's something we live by every day. You are part of our lives and we will always make sure you are safe and never alone." Mabel's eyes glistened with emotion. She had faced many challenges in her life, but nothing had prepared her for the depth of loyalty she saw in these men. They had come to her as strangers and had stayed as family. "I am proud of each of you," she said softly. "You honor kindness with your actions and you show loyalty with your hearts. That is the greatest gift I could ever receive." The bikers nodded, feeling the truth of her words. They had learned something far greater than surviving a storm. They had learned the value of loyalty, respect, and courage, shown quietly but strongly. The bond they shared with Mabel had changed them, teaching them that true strength comes not only from physical power, but from care, trust, and generosity. From that day forward, the 9 bikers made it a point to watch over Mabel. They helped with chores, cleared snow from her driveway, ran errands, and spent time in her company. Mabel's home became a place of warmth, not just from the fire, but from the loyalty and friendship surrounding her. The town watched in quiet amazement as the bikers, known for their toughness and fearless adventures, devoted themselves to protecting one small grandmother who had once helped them in a blizzard. Winter after winter, the pattern continued. The bikers remained vigilant, checking on Mabel during storms, helping with her garden in spring and sharing meals in summer. They honored the promise they had made, never forgetting the courage and kindness that had saved them when they were stranded and cold. Mabel, in turn, continued to share her wisdom and warmth. She taught the bikers patience, the joy of simple work, and the importance of helping others. Her life, filled with small acts of courage and kindness,